100 children, what's going on? We back here one more again for zooming in on sustainability. This year, the Queen quit head from the body of the Gullah Geechee Nation. I so glad that Hunter taught him not robbery, but join we one more again as we crack we teeth. But what are going on down here? This year time, oh, children, we want to look closely at this year. We going to look on this year thing linguistically this year week here. But you know one thing we can't do? We ain't gonna start them without honor them. We'll make them so that we the crack we teach so. They ain't giving them a double lash when they can't find back and nothing like that. They ain't letting all the rest of people teeth way out. Not let them buckle change the way up and things like that. So for the Igbo man, Dinka, Malinke, Yoruba, Gullah, Geechee, Mendi, Temni, Fiki, Bibio, all the other rest of kind of children. What we did it? Rakabulan. Huda, we ancestors this year day. We go crack we teeth like this year. And we go say thank you to God. And thank you to them. What we make this year thing, what 100 children yeti, called Gullah, the rest of us, the other rest of one way, suffer with the buck for them and make up that thing they called Geechee. So let we take a moment of silence. Ashe, Ashe, Ashe. So this year, 100 children thing like that. This year, the Queen quit, head from the body of the Gullah Geechee Nation. I'm so glad that 100 to deal with we one more get. But this year, zooming in on sustainability. And I did from right here, on Centennial Island, in the Gullah Geechee Nation and South Kakalaki. Yeah, the Gullah Geechee Nation going from Jacksonville, North Kakalaki, all the way down Jacksonville, Florida, and 30 to 35 miles inland to this young river called the St. John River. Well, plenty of time people were there and things like that. They crack it like me. They ain't not study about all the rest of people that do cross yonder and thing. But then the other rest of people in there coming, yeah, one cracky teen and say, we cracky, because we didn't do this show. Okay, where him? This shit that we on. Say, can't say we say, well, the way how to do this shit thing, all right, but this shit time we the cracky teen, so we fool. No, sir. Go out and make them so that we the crack them like a this shit. We could have been crack them all kind of rest of it. And rather us, when they hear they say, we know the other rest of thing, that we could have said, je parle français. We could have said, Mangadef. We could have said plenty of things if we were more crack we teach that we talk. Rather us, hi, y'all. Yeah, a lot of people expect to come down to all parts of the Carolina and Georgia and hear somebody say, hi, y'all. But that is the Southern slang. That's not what Gullah is. Gullah is not slang at all. And I know a lot of people have been misled even in recent years with new videos popping up. But let's be clear. Gullah is a language, just like Spanish. ¿Qué pasa? ¿Cómo estás? Just like French. Je parle français. Just like Wolof, just like Twi. All of these are languages of the world. German. Now, what's interesting to me is I've traveled to almost all the continents. I would have completed them this year with the exclusion of one that's melting, and that's a whole nother story for another episode about sustainability and climate change. But what hasn't changed in the climate around the Gullah Geechee Nation and through the Gullah Geechee Nation from Jacksonville, North Carolina to Jacksonville, Florida, is people doing what we call a kiki. One of the kiki boat. One of the yeti crackatiso. You have people start grinning and laughing and acting silly when they hear us speaking our mother tongue, which is Gullah. But they don't do it if I'm speaking this way. They don't do it if I'm speaking Spanish. They wouldn't do it if I was speaking any of the other languages that I mentioned previously. They would be intrigued. They would even say things like, oh, that sounds so nice. And then people who don't speak our language, have never grown up around it, they don't laugh either. They get intrigued. Usually they're like, wow, I wish I knew what she was saying. Or they get tight, like, is she going to talk like that the whole time? I hope not. Okay, especially when I'm in university settings, when I'm in political arenas, I get the tight thing. But when I'm at other affairs, I get the intrigue. Now, the intrigue is fine until the intrigue comes with a recording device. When somebody just walks over in the midst of a Gullah Geechee conversation with a recording device, whether it looks like this, whether it's a video recorder, whether it's your cell phone, that's very inappropriate. Unless you've asked that group of people whether or not you can record what they're saying, It's inappropriate. I know that people think it's okay now because your cell phone is everywhere, but you walked up on somebody else's conversation, as we say, A and B, see your way out. So we don't walk around with signs that say, kiss me, I'm a Gullah, nor do we have little buttons that you're supposed to press. And then it seems like this shine to stop a cracking teeth. So no, if we want to articulate our language, we do it when we're comfortable with people that usually can also hold a full conversation with us. Why is that? Because we're not here for entertainment purposes. We have a living culture and tradition, and our language is part of that. So when people are out here running around making videos to make it entertaining for you because they may not fully grasp Gullah, they grew up in environments where they're combining, yes, local slang, local colloquialism with Geechee, which is a dialect of the Gullah language that's very different than actually hearing people speak Gullah. So let's not get it twisted, as we say. Let's be very clear. Gullah is a language. Geechee essentially is a dialect that emerged from Gullah-speaking people making a bridge. It's a bridge language between American English and the Gullah language. And if you were to watch The Adventure of English, which was done in England a couple of decades back now, that there are excerpts online at YouTube and especially at gullahgeechee.tv, gullahgeechee.tv, you would be able to actually learn that many of the words that people use in American English are African words. They are Gullah words. They are not from Europe, and neither is our language. So when you heard of Ebonics, Ebonics meant ebony phonics because you're talking about the phonetic structure of a language and what tree it really comes from. And that language tree is critical. Our tree is African. Hence, they thought, let's do ebony because it's a strong wood, comes from a strong tree. You know, it's like lignum vitae almost. You know, you have these strong woods. So these trees grow. Let's say ebony. And then the phonics. Well, you know us. We like to abbreviate ebony phonics, Ebonics. Okay? But people then misled individuals, especially the media did, and made it seem like slang and all kinds of stuff is what people were promoting. No, they were promoting the fact that Gullah, which was the origin language of AAVE, African American Vernacular English, is not a bastardization of English. It actually comes from an African tree of languages, wherein English comes from a Germanic tree. So those are two different trees growing on two different continents, two different places, two different soils. So you cannot take this tree from the motherland, the continent, and then say, oh, but all of her children speak this one from this other continent. No. How is that? That was done in order to negate the intellectual capacity of African people to create and maintain their own language. But in Kush, in Kemet, Ethiopia, all these places are on the continent of Africa, where reading, writing, mathematics all began. Even secret societies began in the motherland. When the invaders, the colonizers came, they raped and pillaged and took things from the major libraries and took them to Europe, burned the rest, blew off noses while they were there. So in our case, they tried to blow off we mouth. Try to make we not open we mouth tall, the thing like that. Or if they open them crack up, they crack in the teeth the rest of the way. Don't like we even don't. Don't like the back of them. Otherwise, it's gonna crack it. And try to hold you back on all kind of thing like that. So it was interesting for me in my journey in life because I was always a straight A student, graduated with honors at every level that you could graduate. I graduated with honors. Okay. But conveniently, I ended up at a school with an Anglo teacher. This Anglo teacher puts me in speech therapy. Okay. For me, because I like learning, didn't know at that time, what does that mean? Go in there, they give you a mirror and tell you how to look in the mirror as you speak. And they pronounce things, they have you pronounce them. You pronounce it again, they pronounce it again. And then you get used to seeing how you form letters, how you hear the sound that goes with the letters because you're looking at yourself. Well, when we started looking at ourselves through the eyes of others, is when many people got assimilated and cannot code switch anymore, like I to do anything like that. So the speech therapy helped me, but it destroyed others. Others didn't go through a therapeutic involvement. In fact, they went through corporal punishment that was issued to beat our language literally out of them. I watched numerous classmates here on St. Helena Island get beaten so that they wouldn't speak Gullah. Why and by whom? They were being beaten by Black teachers, African American teachers that were not native Gullah Geechee usually. The native Gullah Geechee ones would say, okay, y'all, you saying D and duh. Y'all can't say D and duh though. Say and the and the, and they would work with the students. But the other ones did the same thing that the Anglo missionaries had done at schools like Penn School, and there are other schools that are along the coast when you go down into Georgia, even where they tried to teach out, and what they couldn't teach out, they beat out the language and all forms of Africanism. Now, I thought that the corporal punishment had ended when I got out of school. I thought that, I guess, because I wasn't in school no more and I didn't have to witness it. I thought that as time moved on, in the latter 1900s, I thought by the end of the 1900s, and we going into 2000, all that had stopped until one day I got a news article about a young lady who was now being given an honor because she spoke Gullah. She was now being given a full ride to college down in Louisiana because she could speak her own native tongue and English. I said, I got to find her. And we were on our way down to New Orleans, where I have a Queen Quet Day, got a lot of love for the fam in New Orleans, especially the Geechee one we did down there and thing like that. Y'all know. All right, you already know. All right. And so definitely we found her. And I've had a lot of love for her, watching her progress in her career to the point that she is not just we lead Jessica no more. She is now Dr. Jessica Berry, who I have actually shared the stage with, shared the dais with, discussing what we are going to discuss today. How do you sustain your language? And how is language a part of cultural heritage? So Jessica, girl, where on a dear and thing like that? I know how to get me the snow, or call on and thing like that. Where you did, girl?
All right, y'all. All right, y'all. I ain't been paying no
Oh,
attention, man. Hold up.
oh, girl, you wasn't paying attention. Okay, you would go outside and go sweat. You knew he wasn't paying attention when your elder the call. You panic. Okay then. So
All
how
right,
did
y'all.
it do?
I am doing well. Happy, happy, happy to be back with Queen. It is always, always a pleasure to be back with the Queen herself, who is consistently carrying the mantle for our culture and our people. Thank you, Queen, for having me. I really appreciate it.
Look, gal, I see you to act up on IG. I said, oh, Jessica, the top way you're singing now. I said, oh, that gal been on the Queen too long. It'll try to do all the day. It'll cracky teeth. It'll do this year. It'll learn each children. And now, oh, he got one singing group to praise the Lord. So how that
That's
going?
it.
I know that's right. So I yet to see you to drop some music coming up. When that going on?
I'm excited. My music is coming out on Friday, November 20th. It is called Flourish, and it really is a testament to thriving in this season of uncertainty. COVID's going on, all kind of crazy stuff going on, but this music is a breath of fresh air for everybody. So if you
Oh,
have any digital outlet, you can find it on Friday the 20th, or you can pre-order it now on iTunes Store and Spotify.
and what's your name? Your singing group name or your name on there so
It's
people find you?
Jessica Berry, just Jessica Berry, and the project is called Flourish.
Flourish. Excellent.
Yes.
Y'all know the darker the berry, the sweeter the tea. I know some of y'all think that was Tupac, but Tupac got that thing. That been an old proverb. That ain't even the Tupac thing. I know y'all said, but he did it right though, right? I know that's right. So yeah, Jessica Berry. Make sure y'all look for that to drop. Flourish. I am looking forward to it because I have watched her flourish for all these years. It has been a
Yes.
blessing from New Orleans to know that you came back home, that Xavier didn't lure you to stand down yonder and to go, but we got you back in South Cackalack. So
That's
tell us
right. I
about,
had to come back.
yes. Now I know at one point you were at South Carolina State, right?
Yeah. So everything really started at South Carolina State. It was really interesting because that's sort of where I started getting interested in studying the Gullah language. All before was just, yeah, I mean, I know we talk that way, that's what we do. But when I came to South Carolina State to work on my master's in speech pathology and audiology, I was in a research class and she told us to do a project. And I was like, what am I going to do this on? I actually met a classmate from the Virgin Islands. And
Mm-hmm.
we were sitting and having a conversation, and I started speaking in my Geechee, and she was speaking in her Virgin Island dialect. And we both were just like, oh my God, we sound alike. And we just were intrigued by the similarities. So from that conversation, we decided we were going to work together, and we did a study on pre-service teachers. Um, Attitudes toward different dialects. And we looked at
Mm-hmm.
Gullah, Southern White English, and African American English. And we recorded 1 minute clips of three speakers just reading some passages in their native dialects. And then we had these pre service teachers, basically teacher students, rate these speakers. And we wanted to see what would the ratings going to be on friendliness and level of education and how successful they were. And across the board, these teachers were from State, USC, and Winthrop University.
Mm-hmm.
All of them rated the Gullah Geechee speaker the lowest in friendliness, level of
What?
education, etc. by a significant amount when we ran the data. And it was interesting because the Gullah speaker was actually the most educated and most successful one
Out of everybody
out
that
of
went.
everybody. Yeah. So it spoke a lot to what you were talking about earlier about the attitudes that exist toward our language and how people devalue how we speak, even though we do have a lot to offer. And so that was when you mentioned the scholarship that I got. Because
Right.
of that work, I was offered the full ride to LSU to
That is
study.
beautiful. So now tell me this. You mentioned that you studied speech pathology.
Yes.
Let's talk about that and define that for my audience because when I hear the word pathology, that's a negative thing right there in and of itself. So when
Mhm.
you say speech pathology, let's talk about that. What is that exactly?
Yeah, so a speech pathologist by trade is the person who studies the pathology of speech. We basically dissect what it means to communicate effectively. Over the years, our field has also grown in embracing the term communication sciences, communication disorders, because we look at the whole person and how they communicate. The pathology piece comes in. One of the things that we do is we diagnose people who have communication impairments or communication disorders. And then we engage in facilitating treatment of those said communication impairments. And it's a broad range of what we do. We work with infants all the way to the geriatric adult population. We also work with people who've had strokes or traumatic brain injury, car accidents, trach vents, swallowing. So those people who have dementia, we work on feeding. So the scope of what we do is extensive. But in the traditional sense, when people hear speech pathology, they think about, like you mentioned, the speech teacher in
Right.
school who comes to correct, that kid who can't say, who says "waja wabbit." The
And it.
speech teacher does
Right.
that, helps to
Right.
correct, if you will, those mispronunciations of words.
Right. And but the thing about it, when it comes down to a cultural heritage, especially that of African people and indigenous people, and someone correcting you, then it makes it seem like your very existence is a pathology.
Absolutely. And that that right there is a really important point because in our field, ASHA is the American Speech Language Hearing Association, um, provided a statement in the 80s or 90s, and its dialect is not disorder. And they
Thank
have a whole statement where they talk about the fact that just because somebody speaks a dialect doesn't mean we have the authority to qualify them as having a disorder because it happened. It happened to you. It happened to several people that I know who were placed in remediation intervention speech therapy services because they were from Gullah Geechee heritage or some other background African American English speakers and put in speech services to correct their speech because they weren't speaking mainstream English. So Asha said that, they made that statement and they gave some context for it. But even over the years, we're still not quite there in terms of how we truly parse and identify these kids who speak a dialect, speak a different language, but also may have a disorder. The
Right.
language has now shifted even in the literature where we're talking about disorder within dialect, because somebody with the dialect can present with the disorder, but
Also
it
with
doesn't mean that it's automatic. And so
right.
we've seen that happen in the past. And what it has done, it has systematically, like you said earlier, decreased the children who have been able to maintain their heritage language.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the irony in my case was that that same teacher, because I so effectively mastered her language, right?
Mhm.
And still held mine. Then when there were other students, I remember there being an Asian student that was from China that came to the class. And then there later was a Russian student that came to the class. She would assign me those students to help them because English now was the second language for them. But
Yeah.
looking at me as a Black child, I couldn't have had a second language. See,
Mhm.
the attitude was, no, you're Black. So you're just American. You're in the melting pot. You're melted. So you shouldn't have any of those other things. You should just sound like me. Well, I could sound like her when I wanted, but I also could have thrown them down like a dish when I've been wanting to do them too. All right. She just didn't know any better. So the thing is then after that, I would do the exchange with those students. I would say, okay, so if I am assigned to help you learn English, then you help me learn your language. So I would
Mm.
get to learn a lot about their languages at a very, very early age. But I never thought about that till this moment when you're talking about this word pathology and how it then affects people for generations. Because most of my classmates who were beaten, literally beaten, their self esteem was lower. So they wouldn't be the one to throw their hand up in class too often to answer something, even if they
Mhm.
knew the answer. And
Right.
this is something that I don't usually call his name, but right now it's a good time. It's a good example. I don't normally call his name. But Clarence Thomas, the justice on the Supreme Court of the United States, is from Pinpoint, Georgia, which is here in the Gullah Geechee Nation. He has even addressed the fact of people saying, well, you sit there on the bench and we don't hear you say nothing. Why are you just sitting up there? And he even said it was because when he was younger, people teased him about the way he spoke. So even at that level of success, this man still had not fully gotten over this thought that there's something wrong. And
Mhm.
what teachers used to say is, oh, that's backward. That's backward. Or I know you done heard this one, Dr. Berry. Broke up. That's
Mhm.
broken English, right? Uh-huh.
I
You know.
have. I have heard it several times. You said a couple things. I'm gonna back up just a little bit because what you described was your mastery of code switching. And in the field of speech language pathology, we have a whole subset of professionals who work with people who want to improve or accent reduction, accent modification for people who come here from different countries and want to reduce the use of their accent. There are people who actually specialize in that. And so you were able to, because you were put in those services, able to master this code switching, this navigating between different codes. But what's also interesting is that you said that there were some people who effectively did not. And see, those are the people who were oppressed and marginalized, if you will, like you mentioned, Mr. Thomas, who has taken on a personality of, not that he's not smart, not that he's not capable, but because every time he spoke and he was chastised, his response was to not speak. So essentially, you silenced his language. And so you have to look at it also when you think about the sustainability of a language and how Gullah Geechee, because it is an orally transmitted language, if you silence the people who speak it, and
Mm-hmm.
tell them it's wrong to speak it, they're
Right.
then teaching the next generation that they shouldn't speak it.
That's
And that's where you get a language dying or becoming extinct, is because you silence the voices who hold that actual language. And I think that the shift in our culture toward um, celebrating and being willing to have conversations about the fact that speaking Gullah in particular is not wrong. Speaking Gullah is not speaking broken English. It's a language and it should be honored and it should be preserved. If we can get that language translated down to the parents who are raising the 1 and 2 and 3 year old to
right.
say, we're going to talk like this and that's fine. And
In
you
it.
can choose. It's your choice when you choose to switch and when you didn't. If you don't want to switch, you ain't got to.
Ever.
And I tell my students that all the time. You don't have to. You choose. You hold the power to be able to do that. And once we give that power back to the people in our community, that's the key to sustaining our language. Is this next generation coming up not feeling like they can't speak and be who they are
Right.
and own it. And I remember when I was working on my dissertation, I flew back here 7 months pregnant on a plane coming home to collect data. I find
Mm-hmm.
a bunch of churn, 5, 6 year old churn. And I remember interviewing their parents and say, well, do your kids speak Gullah Geechee? And I'm like, no. I said,
See,
why? Well,
not
we told them not to. They don't need to talk like that. And so then we started having conversations. Said, well, we talk like that. Our mom and daddy didn't tell us not to.
talking.
We had to have these conversations. They were like, I guess I just didn't think about it because we were told that in order to be successful, we had to switch.
Right.
That's
Right.
what was
Right.
ingrained in our generation. And
Absolutely.
that's just not true.
And it's been multiple generations now that's
Multiple.
happening with. And unfortunately, what is happening due to social media, though, is a reduction in what is the language itself.
Hmm.
Because what is taking place is that you have multiple generations where people have not spoken Gullah fluently.
Hmm.
So then you have the younger generation that is arrogant, honestly, that decides I don't need to respect elders. So I don't have to go to the elders and learn anything. I'll go to the internet. So now Google becomes their elder and Google is not accurate. So now you go to Google instead of grandma. And so you disrespecting your grandma for a device, which to me is just total insanity as a computer scientist and a culture bearer. Okay. Because in Gullah Geechee culture, that's one of the primary things. You honor God and you respect your elders. So the next part is okay, so you now do not know how to speak a language fluently. So you go on the internet, and what you actually find is where Anglo people have written something about what they thought they heard was
Hmm.
filtered it through their European lanes, put it out there in some written context. You absorb that, and then you start saying it mixed with African American vernacular English and mixed with slang, mixed with whatever word you want to call it, that's your current vernacular or colloquialisms. And then you want to tell people on the internet, you speak Gullah. That is not Gullah, though. That's not Gullah. That's as much Gullah as me going to get an Uncle Remus tale or a Bruh Rabbit book, or a started book, which is a white man on Defusky. Get one of them books and then come back and tell you, oh, I know how to speak Gullah because I'm reading this, which they were trying to mimic for entertainment purposes, how they thought was the Negro dialect in the South. Okay, so you are now bastardizing your own culture and community by not respecting your elders who, if you just sat down for a minute, sit on the porch, close this year, turn off the phone, open
Hmm.
this year, open this year, okay, close this year, and then yet it in. They would have
Hmm.
learned how to do the thing the right way and then like that. Said I'm broke up thing while you do the torture. Okay. And so what's going to happen is the next generation will be speaking slang and they'll be calling it saying, oh, it's Gullah Geechee, but it's not. It's now mixed with all kinds of other people's interpretations and English,
Yeah.
straight up and down.
Yeah, and so I think you know you hit on a couple things. So just going back to my training, so one of when I was at LSU, I studied speech pathology, but I found a really strong interest in linguistics. So while I was working on my PhD, I actually got a minor in linguistics, took a whole bunch of linguistics classes because I just thought it was really cool to explore what is it actually, what does Gullah actually mean? What is, if I'm
Yeah.
saying this is a language, how do I know and what does that look like?
Right.
So what we learned was, of course, there's the original Creole Gullah language that was literally the African primarily. So the lexicon, the basic language of it was multiple African languages
Mm-hmm.
mixed with some English grammar structures and sentence
Which was
structures.
largely Elizabethan English grammar structures at that time too.
Right. And so and so that first iteration of the language was meant for bartering and communicating for day-to-day tasks, and we call it a pidgin. And
Mm-hmm.
so
Right.
a pidgin really doesn't have any set structure, any set grammar. But as the people who have developed the pidgin teach the pidgin to their children, and it
Mm-hmm.
becomes their children's first
First
and
language.
only language,
Mm-hmm.
then it creolizes. And so
Right.
that's where we get Gullah. And so what we've seen over the years, and it's true for all of the Pidgin and Creole varieties across the world, Jamaican Creole, Guyanese Creole, is
Mm-hmm.
decreolization. And
Right.
so there are levels of decreolization that happens based on the geographical movement, uh, integration, the bridges being built, schools
Mm-hmm.
coming together. You can look at Hughie, where I'm from. It used to just be King Hoy, and everybody went to King Hoy. Well, now you got Timberland and Philip Simmons and all of these other options where the kids are no longer sort of in this isolated place, but they're
Right.
now exposed to more mainstream
People.
Southern variety.
Right.
Yeah. So what
Absolutely.
you're starting to see is more decreolization
Mm-hmm.
in the Gullah language than we saw in years prior due to those
Due to
reasons.
these
But
new
you,
interactions. Right.
yeah,
And
and
you have
you
more
also
people, an
see,
influx of other people coming in from
yes,
other cultures.
and
Right.
we know that the Charleston Low Country area, according to national data, is one of the fastest growing areas
It is.
in the country in terms of people just coming in from multiple places. I actually did a session with second graders at Philip Simmons 2 weeks ago. There were two kids who were actually from the Hughie King Hoy Wando area. The rest of
Who
them
out
was
of
from
how many?
Massachusetts. 2 out of 30.
Are you serious right
I was so flabbergasted. I just knew I was gonna see my little babies. I know they were
now? Wow.
from Massachusetts and
Every
Texas and everywhere. So imagine the two that are in that class. How do they hold
how do they
on
feel and
to
how do
who
they
they are and how do they feel? Yeah, because I asked the little boy, you know, does your mama? Because I started giving some examples. He said, "Oh yeah, my granny says that, and
you
my
always say
mama
that
said,"
to me.
and I can hear him. He is.
They
I can
sound
hear.
gullible. Right, exactly. You know that everyone and we churn.
That's
Right.
it, but no clue. And so it was really interesting to see. And then also, when we think about this idea of the Gullah language, I always like to tell people there are dialects within a language.
In
If
the
you speak a
language.
language,
Right,
you speak a dialect of the language because
right,
Queen, you from St. Helena, I from
right.
Huge.
Exactly.
Your Gullah Geechee is not like mine.
No,
We
it's totally different.
it's totally different.
But we
And
understand each other though.
but we do,
Right,
but we understand each other. And so that regional, that's one of the things that I also studied was regional dialect variation. How
yeah,
does the language shift according to the region that you're in? And there's some things that are uh, identifiable about Gullah, no matter where you are, our cadence, our pitch,
yeah.
our intonation, the rhythm of our speech. But
Mhm.
what might change is the lexicon, the vocabulary, because where you
Right,
might say Yeti, I could just say here. Because
right.
I
Mm-hmm.
just wasn't, I didn't grow up using more of the African words. I used the intonation and the pitch, but I didn't really use a lot of the words that my granny them used to use. And
Mm-hmm.
even in that, you see the difference in generational
You do. You
in
do.
that
Like say for instance, you'll hear people say chillin' or you hear churn.
churn. See, we say
Right.
churn.
So I'll say churn more. And then down this side, you might yeti both. You'll yeti both. You'll hear chillin' or churn, depending on who
Hmm.
talking and who he talking to. You see
That's
what I'm
right.
saying? So, right. And just like a good example, even just in terms of a colloquial aspect of it,
Hmm.
is we say crab ball, y'all say crab crack.
Crab crack. Hmm.
You see what I'm
Hmm.
saying? So it's those little nuances that make you know now if you're a Gullah speaker, you can start to figure out what region or what section of the Gullah Geechee Nation a person from too. You get
Yes.
kind of used to that. So you'll be like, oh, that one is from Beaufort.
Uh-huh.
Y'all from Charleston. I
You
know
can
y'all.
pick them out. I know where you from.
Right. And then somebody else would be like, well, y'all from Georgetown. So then Georgetown turn and be like, oh no, we don't speak that anyway. Y'all know how y'all is in Georgetown.
Uh,
But so I think like that. So yeah, so yes, definitely that's one of the things you and I have constantly talked about this, that there's language, and then there's
mm-hmm.
dialects within the language, but don't be tossing our language out, calling our language a dialect. We have a language, and
We
then we have
do.
dialects and
We have
regional
the
versions of dialects. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so going back, Queen, I wanted to address
Go
something you
ahead.
mentioned just about the generation who doesn't honor the elders and go to the elders for information, but they go to social media and they go to the internet. I
Yeah.
think that the internet has done that. It's made all of these things accessible. But for the Gullah culture, our language isn't accessible in that way. But because that's how this generation is trained, that's all
Yeah.
they know to do. And so
Mhm.
it's these conversations like this and conversations that like I gotta have with my daughter and my cousins and all of them and say, y'all need to go sit down and
Yeah.
talk with granny them. Y'all need
Yeah.
to ask them what happened when they were little. I
Right.
remember when I was in Louisiana, I every time I came home, I would sit down with my big daddy and granny and I
Mhm.
would record and we would just talk and I would just ask them questions because I wanted to know like what did it look like then and
Right.
what how does this impact us now and why did y'all make some of the decisions you made? And like you said, they saw kids being spanked and beaten and they were told they shouldn't speak the language. And they taught that to my aunts and uncles and them who decided,
Mhm.
they had to change to get
Man.
into college and to get
Right.
education and to live a better life. They wanted to see their
That's
kids do
what it
better.
was.
So
Yep.
a lot of this decreolization that we're seeing and the decrease in the use of the original Creole Gullah language, unfortunately,
Mhm.
is because the Anglo people ingrained in us that we couldn't get educated if we didn't
Right.
speak their language
That's right. Or we weren't
or
educated
we weren't if
because
we
we
did
still
it.
could speak our language, even though we had
Exactly.
degrees. More often than not, me and one of my assistants, who's from Charleston too, we often say we got degrees that can line the wall. So how do you think we crack in things like that? Okay, it's like how can you say we're unintelligent and crazy when we have degrees like you said, even in your example that you gave of the study you did, the most educated person in the room is this Gullah person, this Geechee person, this person that come from down here.
That's
Okay,
it.
but you are equating IQ with
Mm-hmm.
language, and there is no connection between those
Yeah.
two things.
No.
Okay, and so herein lies a major problem, because then in our communities, I was listening to Bishop T.D. Jakes, and he was actually talking about money, but
Mm-hmm.
he pointed out, and the same set of people, the Buckra folk, who our folks have gotten to the point where they don't want to live and advance in that way that you would talk about the aunties and the uncles learned they had to go get the education and do this so you could advance. You have generations of people who don't want to quote unquote leave the hood,
Mm-hmm.
and they mean that even linguistically and educationally. It's not that they can code switch, because they can't now. They only speak one way, whichever one way they learn. They know
Mm-hmm.
that one way, but they don't even want to graduate high school, much less go to
Mm-hmm.
college, because somebody else on the block is going to tease them if they do. That's insane. So
Mm-hmm.
now you're saying, well, if you want, so they're equating it like, if you want to really be down as a black person, don't advance. No, that is not the way that should be assessed. We need to recognize that over the generations of African people being in North America, the wise ones always wanted the next generation to advance. They fought, they died, they let the literal foundation of America be poured with their backs bent to pour it,
Mm-hmm.
expecting that the next set was going to put building blocks on that foundation and go higher. And the next one was going to do some more and go higher. And the next one's going to do some more and go higher. Do not regress, because people are psychologically telling you that to be black means to be ghetto. To be Geechee means to be thug. That is not what that means. like you said earlier, was you did your studies, you started looking at what does Gullah mean. And people who break down the word Gullah have found repeatedly. First of all, if you go to Strong's dictionary for the Bible, the word Gullah is in there. So that's
Mm.
homework, y'all. Go do that, okay? That's a little Hebrew homework for you. It's been here. That's not a new word, really. All right.
Mm-hmm.
But now the word Gullah, people, it means people blessed by God. So why would you want to throw away your anointing? You anointed
Well,
to
so
declare.
so so let me. I'm gonna answer that. I
Yeah,
don't even know if they're throwing it away as much as they don't know.
that's
And
it.
and the reason I say that is because that was me.
Uh-huh.
From elementary, middle, high school,
High school.
nobody said you're Gullah Geechee.
Or
Nobody
that you're
said
valuable.
this is what you speak. Nobody told me this was something that I should keep and honor. We didn't have those conversations. That wasn't
Oh,
a part of what we talked about. And when I do presentations, I say it's when Gullah Geechee had no name. When
yeah.
we first started, you know, owning this thing. I remember senior year in high school, and y'all boy, look, yeah, I ride or die. That was like our anthem. And we knew that we celebrated it because it sounded like us. Like it was,
Yeah.
it distinguished the
Yeah.
Charleston people, Low Country people from the
Right.
Columbia people. But we had
Right.
no idea the history and the
Behind
reason why, yeah, why we should own that. So I
it.
think that sometimes I don't know that they're throwing it away intentionally more so than they're not being educated
Educated.
on
Right.
the importance of
Uh,
keeping it. And that education piece in the preservation, we can't leave it to the school systems.
no, absolutely not.
They
Right.
got it. It's in the curriculum for third, fifth, and eighth grade, but
Yeah.
it's in there. There's
Yeah.
no guidance, there's
No
no
guidance.
materials or
Right.
nothing like that.
Right.
So
And it's
it's
not about language. It's about Gullah culture.
culture
So
and
what,
history.
right, and history. And so what usually happens, because I go to certain schools when there's no pandemic, go to different schools and speak for those same grade levels. And it's usually for
Hmm.
history day. You see, and what when I ask the students, what else do you already know about Gullah? We
Nothing.
know about basket, or they make good food. Um, there's a song the teacher had played for us. That's it. They're
That's it.
relegated to that, and they minimize once again the totality of us as Gullah Geechee people. But I want to
Hmm.
double back on this, what you said about not being taught this in school and not having conversations at all in school about it. Because wasn't there the conversation with you about your class, and you wanted to go into a particular set of honors classes, and didn't
Hmm.
the teacher deny you access? Wasn't that part
Yeah.
of the journey?
So in high school, I remember always really enjoying reading in English. And we got to high school and we were told we take CP classes or TP classes. And I questioned why I wanted to take honors English because I felt like I would be bored in
In the
college
regular,
prep English, in the
right?
regular. And I was told, no, you came from Hughie, King Hoy, the way y'all speak, you would not be successful in an honors English class. And I distinctly remember thinking, huh? I thought it was very weird. So I talked to a couple of my other classmates who were like, well, we want to take it too. We had all been in upper level classes in middle school. So we
Absolutely.
went to the guidance counselor together and said, can we take honors English class? We were told no again. And then eventually we were allowed to, five of us, to take an
Mhm.
honors English class. And we did well. All of us did
Right.
well. But that was one of the first direct rejections of who I was and my language at that school. And that school was a primarily white school and they bused us. So this
Uh-huh.
was from
Yeah.
I graduated in 2004. So from 2000 to 2004, they bused us from King Hoy to Hanahan.
I
And we were the black school, they were the white school. So we were
right.
in their environment. And I think that some of the preconceived
No.
notions
Mhm.
about who we were as a people, and remember, this integration happened in 1996. I
Yeah.
got to the high school in 2000 and we were still being denied up until that point access to honors and AP level
And that is
classes
and that is
because
mad.
of how we spoke.
Right. And that is madness, because when you just use the terminology integration, integration was actually happening in the 60s.
Hmm.
Okay. So now you're talking about 30 years after that, and then add some more, okay, that we're still dealing with integrating schools in South Carolina. That's madness in and of itself. And that's a whole nother topic for another day as
That's a
well.
whole nother topic.
Right. But that's good that this word came up, because what I'm saying and what you're saying, and I'm not arguing against any of what you're saying, I agree with you as well, that a lot of it has to do with us not being educated about things. But there is also the rejection of knowledge,
Mm-hmm.
because the
Oh
same
yeah.
thing that you have stated, people go on the internet and look for things. There's
Mm-hmm.
no doubt that you go on the internet and you find me if you put in Gullah. There ain't no doubt.
Yes.
And there's no doubt that you don't find people like Dr. Amir Jamal Ture and others who've been out here for decades making it clear that it is all right to be who we are, and it's all right to accept our language, and that there is a language that has a historical connection. So
Mm-hmm.
if you now sit there, and because it's not a reality TV show, we don't hold your attention span, now that's just a rejection of knowledge now. You can no longer just say, well, I just did not know. Now, I know that this has been a problem and remains a problem in some Gullah Geechee families, is you go to grandma and you say, Grandma, you mind, like you mentioned, I did the same thing you did. Can I record this? No. Well, you record.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But don't get discouraged then and walk off. What you need to do, y'all remember all them foolishness on TV? You would sit there and listen very closely and try to memorize everything grandma say and
And
go back
take
to
notes.
journal. Right. Or take notes. Or grandma might say, you can write them down, but don't turn on that thing. Don't bring that thing in you, but you can write them down. Well,
Mm-hmm.
get a pencil and a paper, sit down, close your mouth, and write. And that's where a lot of us fall short, is that one more step. We take it as, well, I ain't gonna do nothing, then forget them. She ain't want me for this. No, follow the directions. Again, respect your elder. You
Mm-hmm.
want this opportunity to learn. This is the teacher. Let the teacher teach. Don't think you can teach when you haven't even been a successful student. That's the point. You
Mm-hmm.
need to learn before you teach. And so one of the things is, I know somebody else, grandmama, don't talk to me. I ain't want to talk about that stuff. I ain't want y'all talking about that. Y'all don't
Mm-hmm.
speak that in here. Now you say, but grandma, you speak in Gullah yourself. You Geechee yourself, and you, I just hear you just now. You want to talk to your sisters on the phone, and that is grown people business. Get out here, get out here. Okay, I know that. Don't think I don't know. I know who you are
Mm-hmm.
dealing with. And that generation is the generation who was whipped.
Yes.
Have to understand that once again, we are telling you there's a historical context for everything. And part of that has caused the decreolization prior to this generation of
Mm-hmm.
decreolization. But there's also something called revitalization.
Yes.
Aha. Yes. Okay.
Yes,
So there's
yes.
two ends of the spectrum. Two ends of the spectrum. I learned that term revitalization when the government, the US government, wrote about me
Mm-hmm.
and said that I was leading a revitalist movement. And I was like, what? Let me Google that. Right now, I didn't Google it, but I did go to a physical dictionary and make sure, what do these English speakers mean by this? And they were saying, yeah, she's leading a movement that is allowing not just the language to continue, but the cultural traditions and Africanisms of the people to continue. Because prior to that, all of this intellectual data that had been amassed by numerous scholars, so called, that came down and studied us in various ways, whether it was through medicine, whether it was through language, whether it's through history, whether it's through agriculture, whether it's through herbology, whatever different ways they've tried to study us over these generations that Africans have been here from the 1500s forward, and especially once the antebellum times were over and they were really coming down, writing down stuff about us. Okay, and taking it back, the trifatifi vibranium and things like that, and it's still a trifidum. All right, so here it is. Their scholarship had said we were dead or dying. You mentioned that
Mm-hmm.
earlier. That our language was dying, and I remember the most horrific feeling I've ever had in the work that I've done for now over 4 decades was I was invited to a linguistic conference in Miami, Florida. And I was invited there by someone who's a professor in Texas who went every year and talked about the seminal, what the seminal languages they would say, but which is
Mm-hmm.
really what we would call Old Gullah. Like if there's
Mm-hmm.
English, is Old Gullah. And so he said, wow, oh, wow, this is wonderful to meet you. We met over the internet communicating through the Gullah Geechee Sea Island Coalition. He said, I want to get you to Miami to be a speaker, because it's one thing for us who teach English to discuss languages and discuss Creoles. And this conference largely focused on Creoles. However, it's another thing for someone who speaks this language to come there and do a session. So he got me there. I did my session, and then he did his session. I went to his session. He came to my session, and people were amazed. And I'll never forget, this Anglo man walked up to me, hand out, oh, it's such an honor to meet you, because I thought all your people were dead. I was horrified. It felt like he had punched me in my stomach. It's how my stomach just like caved at that moment. For someone to say in your face, especially an Anglo man to say to me, officer in Hell Island, Gullah Geechee as I is, black and proud as I is, you gonna tell me you thought all my people were dead? And I mean, said it without flinching, saw nothing wrong with saying it, and trying to shake my hand while he said it. And I was just so annoyed. And I've told people about that over the years. I said, people continue to try to write our demise. But that moment was pivotal for me, because it then gave me more fervor in terms of seeking folks like you out, when I would hear their stories of how people were trying to denigrate them, trying to literally hold you back, like you mentioned, putting you in remedial classes or stopping you from being in honors classes, simply because of the fact that you speak a language that is different than theirs, that they are trying to kill us. If we don't change, then kill us. So it reminded me very much of Roots with Toby. All right, that whole Toby scene. All right, I'm Kunta. No, you're Toby. So instead of I'm Gullah Geechee, no, you Negro, or worse. No, you're a slave, or worse. But don't say that you are this African thing. That has to go. And the missionaries continued to teach it. When the public schools came along, they continued to teach it. And as we're saying, many of us as educators fought to get that in the curriculum and get it in the South Carolina state requirements for education. But as you said, no materials. No materials. The greatest material y'all can have, though, is to communicate with the people who speak the language and live the traditions. So many times y'all hear me say the word traditionalists, and that is to separate us from those fully assimilated Gullah Geechee who don't want no part of this conversation. They don't want to hear our language at all. Now, if they can be paid to be Gullah Geechee, all of a sudden they Gullah Geechee. But never speak the language, because to them, in their mind, though, they still retain this thought that it is below something, it is backward, or it is a broken version of something. And we have to break that psychological ramification that is still there, that curse that is still there, that bondage that is still there. Because once someone binds your mind, they don't have to put chains on you anymore. And herein lies the problem. So now when you talk about the influx of teachers, tell me, have you done any further work with schools now to educate the educators? Because that's a lot of work that I do, is to educate educators who are coming to the Gullah Geechee Nation to know there is the existence of a different culture here that has its own language and its own learning patterns because of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So over the past, I think 2 to 3 years, I've been working with Charleston County School District and doing some professional development sessions with the educators where we spend about 3 hours talking about, and I spend half of this time first talking about themselves, talking about the implicit and explicit biases that they bring to the classroom, teaching them then about the Gullah culture in a general aspect and what it is, the history, what it sounds like. I go into the linguistic structures, some of the grammar structures that we use. And then I talk about, now, how does this impact the kids? How does this make the kids feel? And during these sessions, I do a lot of activities where I put them in the position of the child and have them do activities where they're forced to code switch to a dialect that's unfamiliar. And we get to talk about, now, how does that make you feel? And I think by putting them in those scenarios, they understand that because these kids, just like somebody who speaks Spanish, French, German, whatever, They come to the United States, they're put in a classroom, and they're expected to learn how to speak English, but they're given services, ELL,
Right.
ESOL services.
It's so
But our children
yeah.
who speak Gullah Geechee, the language of the Low
Yeah.
Country, are offered zero
Yeah.
accommodation, zero
Mm-hmm.
accommodations to help them to navigate the transition, the metacognitive and metalinguistic transition that it takes to go from Gullah to African American English through Southern White English in some instances, depending on where they live, to a variety, a dialect of mainstream or standard English. These kids don't have anybody to help them. So the last part of my presentation, I really talk about how do educators create safe spaces for kids to practice this code switching and this navigating between these different dialects inside the classroom without penalty and without judgment and without fear of retaliation and without fear that they're going to fail because of how they speak, or even if it comes out in their writing. Because I always give the example, when I was at LSU, I remember taking my Pigeon and Creole class for the first time, and the teacher was teaching, and she said she got to Gullah because that was a part of the textbook, and she said, "This language is dead." And I
Oh,
about passed out in that class. I
what?
raised my hand. I said, "Well, Gullah dead, who killed him?" And
Annie.
she just started screaming, "Ah, what do you mean? Did you just speak Gullah?" And I'm like, I said, "That's where I'm from. That's why I'm here." She didn't know this because, again, this was my minor. She
Yeah.
ran down the hall, got all the linguistic instructors. They came running. "Oh my God, everything we read talks about Gullah dying or being dead or on the verge of death. And
Mm-hmm.
so to know that you're a speaker, oh my gosh." And so we just had these long, conversations. And so bringing that dynamic into a classroom where, especially in Charleston County, and I'm sure across the corridor, educators are coming from everywhere.
Everywhere.
98% of these educators are coming from Missouri and Utah and Kentucky, all of these places in the Midwest and everywhere else. And they don't even know what Gullah is.
Exactly.
Just
Never
getting
heard of it. They never
never
heard
heard
of
of it. And
communication.
so
Right.
they're put in a classroom and nobody tells them that this is what they're
Right.
going to encounter. So now you come into this classroom and all these kids talking like this, yeah, and you
Annie.
ain't know what's going on. And they just said that this and that, and then they're going for it. And
What's
they
going on?
didn't know. And now they're like, everybody, something's wrong with all of these kids.
Oh my God.
And
They can't
nothing's
be
in
that
place.
person. They got to be the turn.
It a churn. It ain't me. Now you have some teachers who will try to figure it out, but then you also have those who will just, they come in three categories. Either they're gonna overcorrect them, which is wrong,
Right.
or not do anything,
Yeah.
right? Or just or try to balance both. And so my work over the past 2 to 3 years has really been to build a foundational course where we can start the conversations with these educators and give them a base for which to go by. And I really love talking to my high school educators because they walk out of there thinking, "Oh my God, I have redlined so many papers." And I give them strategies because I remember as I was writing my general exams, my
Mm-hmm.
paper was all marked up and I just was crying because I was like, "I'm a failure. I'm trying to get a PhD and I can't even write." And I
Wow.
took it to my linguistics instructor and I said, "Can you tell me what is going on?" And she said, so she looked it over and she says, "Okay, now go back to our class. So remember, I had you identify the grammar patterns of Gullah and we really broke it down and we did our trees and talked about the different things." She says, "Look at what you're doing." She said, "You didn't write am in this sentence." Well, in
Right.
Gullah, y'all don't
Right.
have to say am. You can
Right.
say, "I'm mad." She was like,
Right.
and so as you're writing, you're just writing it like you would say it. She's like,
Yeah.
so it's not that you don't understand the concepts. It's not that you're not smart. It's not that you can't do it. You just got to go back and edit yourself. And she showed
Right.
me how to do that. She says, "Oh, since you know that in Gullah you don't have to use am, now go back and read your paper and look for the places where am should be and put them in there." She says,
Exactly.
"Nothing wrong with your work." And
Right.
so I use those kinds of techniques to help educators see it from a different lens because they'll just say, "Well, these kids are leaving off S's and leaving off EDs and they're making these
Wow.
errors." And I tell them, first of all, you have to change your language from
Mhm.
saying that they're making errors to telling them you're using the pattern, the Gullah language pattern. That's
Right.
it.
Right.
And we want you in writing because we don't write in Gullah, we write in mainstream English. So
Mhm.
use writing because it's across the board. That's how we write. And
Mhm.
say, "I want you to, in your writing, to use the standard grammar pattern.
Right.
There's nothing. And so when you use that kind of language, moving from error language to pattern language, then
Hmm.
you really create an environment where the kids don't feel like they're wrong
Exactly. And they don't feel broken. And
and they
now
don't
they
feel
don't.
broken. And
Right.
they feel empowered to say, oh, okay, so in this sentence, I use the Gullah pattern, but I understand the other pattern. I just chose not to use it in this particular instance. And that's okay. And I always like to leave off my sessions with really explaining, when we teach our kids about how they're using the Gullah language and when they're using it, it's a choice. Always has, always will be. I can choose when I use them and when I don't. I can turn them off and I can turn them on. And when we give them options, we empower them to go on and get the education. We empower them to feel like I can own being Gullah and I can move and go to college, and or not even if I don't want to go to college, I can start my own business, but I can
Right.
still own my Gullah Geechee heritage. And I think moving the language of our people in particular to a ownership of our culture and who we are is going to be one of the major keys to uh, preservation and
Right.
sustaining who we are. And I think that some of it also is a lot of us are afraid of the Africanness because we
Okay.
weren't taught about it. And when
Right.
we were, it was taught in the context of slavery. And
Right.
I don't like that. I don't like the slave
Right.
narrative. We know that it happened, but who we are isn't that.
Exactly. We're
And that's,
way more than that. The
we're
story is
more than
much
that.
faster. Yes.
It's,
Yes.
it's it's way more than that. And so I think that that word, even the word revitalization, is interesting to me because I get it. I get it. It's sort of like re-energizing, re-engaging. And I think I like those words
I
better
like that too.
because we're re-engaging the people who already own it
Exactly.
to talk about it
Right.
and to
And in
not
some
depress
cases
it
we're
and share it
engaging.
with the next.
Right. And in some cases we're engaging, and the others we're
Yeah.
engaging. Yeah. Because some
Yeah.
were fully engaged for the same reasons we've outlined today that they just didn't know. No
That's
one ever
it.
said. I mean, like
No
I
one said it.
right. When you live something, you don't study it. That's what I always tell people. So any of
Yes.
Gullah Geechee, we didn't go around. I'm not Gullah Queen Quet. I mean, y'all be doing that, but I'm not Gullah Queen.
You're
Okay, you know what I'm saying? You're not Gullah Jessica or Geechee Jessica.
no,
No,
we don't
you're
identify like that. I'm Jessica, and I
no,
just happen to be from the area, and I speak the language, and I am in the culture, and so I'm all of that. But we don't walk around talking about that. We don't.
no.
We just
We
own
live.
it. We live
Yeah,
it. We live it. And I think that but getting our people to be able to talk about it is
yeah.
going to be key
It's
to
critical.
authentic preservation.
That's the point. I love that. Authentic preservation and authentic continuation.
Yes.
Because what we really want is not to just preserve because then it gets put on a shelf someplace, tell folks get tired of it, then they unscrew the top and let it go and it's dispelled with. Okay,
Yeah.
we want to make sure there's authentic continuation, which is why we have to critique ourselves at times.
Yes.
There are things that we can't just let slide
Right.
because then these things become part of the narrative that's told
Mm.
as what we are and who we are. And it's actually coming from somebody else's lens. We need to
Yeah.
respect the scholarship that comes from within our own community as African people in general,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
especially as Gullah Geechee and things like that, who we are. So we going to own them, we have to own one another. And know that
Mhm.
all we ain't cracking thing like that. There plenty we to go to school and things like that. Now we all would want something to do, then y'all come to me and say, we send you to school for that. Okay, and then y'all want us to do things we ain't going to school for. But when we try to tell you things for your own good, I ain't gonna tell me nothing. They think it's smart because they go on school. No, it's just because
Mhm.
I might have some good information to share. Okay, so and I'm so happy you have provided so much good information today. Now, one thing I just want to correct you on: the only time we don't write in Gullah, cause see my book right here, see my books right here. I didn't write Gullah Geechee now. Yes, I did them. I did them just cause they said we couldn't do them. I did them.
Look,
Said we couldn't do them. I bring out two novels one time, and
look
y'all
here.
y'all go to gullahgeechee.biz, go to gullahgeechee.biz and support the queen. These are the first two novels written in Gullah Geechee by we, for we. This is the FUBU version.
And and I'm glad you said that because when I say we don't write it, and I mean that there is no standard
Yes, I
Gullah written
Yeah.
language. The
Right.
language in itself is an oral language.
It's
And so what
oral.
I've seen, one of the more recent research pieces that I've been able to do, and I need to work on publishing that anyway, but
Uh-huh.
I have consistently, when I go on social media, I take screenshots of people as they're writing in Gullah, and I'm analyzing the consistency. Like, for example, we say E over there. Some people
Yeah.
might write a capital E and then a little e. Some people write just a capital E. Some people write two lowercase e's.
Uh-huh.
So I'm seeing now, and it could have always been, but just over the past 3 years since I started like just collecting samples,
Mhm.
is seeing that people are becoming more confident
Yeah.
in using their heritage, Gullah Geechee dialect and language on social media as a
Right.
way uh,
Communicate
to communicate
and to
and to
represent
say and to
themselves.
signal in
Right. Yeah.
group belonging.
Yeah.
And so I love that because I
Me.
think that what it could possibly lead to is like the books that you've written, and
Yeah.
as people begin to write, we can begin to create those accommodation mechanisms for
Absolutely.
our kids
Hmm.
to improve their academic performance. Because at the end of the day, I'm an academic. I want to see our kids do well, but them tests ain't right for them,
And
ain't
it
right for them.
don't know.
And
There's total
so
bias in all those tests. They prove
regardless of
it
they
for
can
total
code
bias.
switch, yeah,
Mhm.
regardless if they can code switch out this world or not, the test still ain't for them. I
Mhm.
don't think that I'm the smartest person in the world. I'm not the best test taker, but I can guarantee you that if somebody had translate that test into Gullah Geechee for me, I might have did better.
Mhm. Mhm.
you
Uh,
know and so looking at what kind of linguistic accommodation strategies can we come up with to help our kids perform better academically and have the same academic opportunities that people who don't have to worry about that have, or the people who have access to those services. Because see, when the kids who in ELL and ESOL, when they go to take standardized tests, somebody's translating Spanish, then they read it in English, and then the kid gets to respond. So guess what? Now they've got it in multiple modalities, and you really can't tell what they know and what they don't know because it's been presented in their native tongue. Our
mhm.
kids don't get that.
I
And
get.
some people don't think that it's important, but that is one of kind of my soapbox as a speech language pathologist, linguist. But my direct area is child language development, child language disorders. And I'm really, really interested and passionate in how do we help our kids develop strong core literacy and language, spoken and written communication skills to be successful. And I don't think, not for 1 second, that we have to take away their heritage language to do that.
Right.
They
I.
can own both and succeed if we will come up with the accommodation tools
Mhm.
that they will need to be successful. And so
Absolutely.
I think that this idea of talking about linguistics and talking about the language and having them have ownership comes also with the part of what else is going to be done to
Mhm.
ensure that they continue to be successful beyond, grade school and into college and beyond. And I
And
think that
that.
there's several examples of people who have done that in our culture. You named a few, you
Yeah.
know, um, but we almost kind of had to do it on our own. You know
You
what I
do.
mean? Like
Right.
we had to
Mhm.
figure it out.
Absolutely.
And so, what about the ones who aren't able to? What can we do to help them? You
Right.
know?
And that's why we even have this program.
Yeah.
Because some of the folks are always asking, well, how do I do this? How do I do that? And this program allows us to give them links to that. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that right now, and I know we've gone over time, is that your last chapter speaks to what you just said in your one might say soliloquy that you just gave, right? Forever Geechee is
Yeah.
the title of your final chapter in
Mm-hmm.
your book. And you close the book with saying, this book is an active disclaimer that the negative stigma associated with being Gullah Geechee is no more. It is our time to be Gullah Geechee and proud. So, in the spirit of celebration of efforts to preserve the culture, language, and history of Gullah Geechee, join us as we proclaim forever Geechee. And so I love that. And y'all need to go and get this book right here, the Little Gullah Geechee book. Now I can tell y'all why I vex about this book now, because y'all see that the slash is not there between Gullah Geechee. And that let me give y'all some history before y'all go, including Dr. Berry.
Go ahead.
It's
Go ahead. Teach
very
us.
important. It's very important that that slash is there. It was a political vote to remove the slash. And that was a US thing. That was a US government thing to fly in the face of the self-determination of Gullah Geechees to remove the slash. It was literally a vote. I have it recorded. And they did it intentionally because they said we want to disassociate ourselves with those who are trying to be self-determined in the Gullah Geechee Nation. So we're going to remove the slash. The slash was placed there so that people would know Gullah Geechee are forever one people, that we would no longer allow others to separate us because socio-anthropologists and other academics had separated us into two separate groups for generations and had Gullahs thinking whatever happened with the one they call Geechee ain't got nothing to do with we. And had Geechees thinking what happened with the one they call Gullah ain't got nothing to do with we. And they would say, well, South Carolina ones is the Gullah ones, the Georgia ones is the Geechee ones, or the ones on the island is the Gullah ones, the ones in the city ain't the... No. Gullah Geechee is one. And why is this so important to me? Because I'm the person that actually first put those two words together. When you first searched, when the internet became brand new, that's how old I am. And I'm a computer scientist. I've been a computer scientist since buildings, the CPU is the size of the building and bigger than the one I'm sitting in. When I put on the internet Gullah slash Geechee, it was a way to bring them together. I'm a mathematician. I did not want to dash because that's a minus sign. And I felt that too many people had taken away from us. When we got the Gullah Geechee Cultural Heritage Act passed, it was done with a slash. That is the federal law. There was another group for their own agendas and for their own purposes that then decided we're going to go against the law, and we're going to also go against the Gullah Geechees who stood in their right to self-determination and formed as a nation and put a space because we want to separate back and say, well, no, but some of them are Gullah and the other ones identify as Geechee. But it's all because of what you said very eloquently, Dr. Berry. They do it because they don't know and they don't understand. Some people have heard the word Geechee all their life, or most of us have. They may not have heard the word Gullah, or they heard the word Gullah but weren't sure. Is that the same thing? Isn't it? And as we've explained today, linguistically, Gullah is a language, Geechee is a dialect. People-wise, Gullah Geechee are the same people. There's no separation. So that's why y'all will see me be adamant about, like, that's why y'all see my Twitter is Gullah Geechee. I love it. My Twitter, my Instagram, Gullah Geechee together, because there's no space, ain't no slash, ain't nothing. But otherwise, for people to be clear on paper that there is no separation, there is no space, that's why that slash goes there. And so, if you don't know the history behind it, you won't realize what is actually happening, that other people have political reasons that they want to denigrate us and separate us even unto this moment. Don't let them do it. As she has said, let's proclaim who we be. We be forever Gullah Geechee. We be Gullah Geechee anointed people. So y'all make sure Dr. Berry tell them how they can follow you on social media. How can they get an autographed copy of this book and thing like that? If it can get them autographed, or can it get them online, or what? And we know the music coming out. Remind them how to get the music.
Yeah, so you can follow me on social media at the Geechee Scholar, or at Hey Jessica Berry. You can find a Little Gullah Geechee book, A Guide for the Coming Out, on Amazon. So you can just go on Amazon and search it, and you can purchase it there. It'll be to you quick. It'll be to you faster than I can get it to you. And then hopefully, when the world open back up and COVID goes away, you will find me somewhere at a library being able to talk about my book and be able to autograph it for you. But I hope that you will grab it and learn something from it. And please know, this is not a comprehensive review of Gullah. It is meant to be a guide for somebody who is interested in learning a little bit more, and then it gives you some more resources, and it's supposed to spark your interest in digging deeper and grabbing those books that are written in Gullah, like the one that Queen has written, and her children's book that she has written. It's meant to spark an interest in people to go out and consume more from our people, about
Right.
who we are.
Right. From our people, from we and things
That's
like that.
it.
Yeah. And so again, if y'all are interested in one of the books that I'm not sure if it's a resource in her book or not, but this is a good one that a lot of people who want to see the phonetic structure, you want to see the language that linguists use in writing alongside what it was the attempt to write Gullah down. then get this book, The Legacy of Igbo Landing, Gullah Roots of African American Culture. You can obtain this as well as the two novels, the novel series. They are partners like that. Okay. You can obtain them at gullahgeechee.biz, gullahgeechee.biz, and always follow we at Gullah Geechee on Instagram. All right, at Gullah Geechee on Twitter, and also GullahGeecheeNation.com. Now, let me help y'all one more again. GULLAH is Gullah. Geechee, GEECHEE. And the no I ain't Geechee for the we, okay? All right. So GullahGeecheeNation.com. And you can also follow the Gullah Geechee Nation on Facebook. We have a Facebook fan page. This video will be there. But if you subscribe for free to GullahGeechee.tv, GullahGeechee.tv, you'll be able to watch this, share it with your classes, share it with your family members, share it at the family reunion. Yeah, we've been talking about you, Grandma.
Yeah, sure, better talk about him.
Cracky teeth, okay? Yeah, we've been talking about Grandma. Now, so stop do that. Let them children learn how to cracky teeth and things like that. And you just, of course, switch and want them children for know you to say. That way, though. Okay, so we know a lot of y'all don't want your children to know the language because you know you ain't want them children to know all of what you're talking about. But they need to know before you go. All right. And so definitely follow Dr. Berry. Oh, you will enjoy following her. I love following her on Instagram. It is great. So definitely make sure to follow her. And there also, if you go to gullahgeechee.tv and you put in Queen Quet and Dr. Jessica Berry, you'll also see other sessions that we've done, including one we did down in Donaldsonville, Louisiana, talking about our language way back yonder. You'll say, wow, that looked like a younger version of them, because it was. Okay, that was a little while ago. So definitely, Dr. Berry, any final words to the family? You know, it's wonderful. We've had several people here with us today, live as well. Any final words you want, Jordan and Chillin, before we go?
Well, I'll just say this: continue to own who we are and celebrate who we are and encourage the next generation to do the same thing. It's going to be up to us to preserve us. And I do believe that we have the power to do that and to ensure that this language does not die and is not threatened, but that it continues. So I'm just excited for everybody who joined us live, everybody who's going to watch this later, that we will push the fact that Gullah is good and
Any,
Gullah is okay and Gullah is a language and it's okay to speak it and it's okay to be who we are.
any though. Thank you, yeah. And we so glad that we be Gullah Geechee anointed people forever. We be Gullah Geechee. This year, the Queen Quet, head from the body of the Gullah Geechee Nation. So glad for air hug my gal, Dr. Jessica Berry. Like I said before, the darker the berry, the sweeter the juice. And now the day we done give you the truth. So y'all chillin', going out, Jonah, hold upon who you be glady for who God done make you and thing like that. And crack your teeth, how Hunter want crack your teeth, because God give you this your thing. So it can't be broke up to all. It's a blessing. You know, Gullah the people blessed by God. If you ain't want your anointing and blessing, you give them to me. And I go, I keep going on forever. Gullah Geechee. So peace, blessings, health, and safety, everybody. We love you.